The massive doors of the Galactic Senate chamber opened with a hiss that echoed through the circular hall. Ambassador Yuna stepped through first, her black diplomatic uniform crisp and formal. Behind her walked Captain Junho, his military medals catching the artificial light from 1,000 different suns. They had practiced this moment for months, but nothing could prepare them for the sight. Before their eyes, 847 species filled the chamber. Some floated in suspended gravity fields. Others stood on platforms adjusted for their specific atmospheric needs. A few existed only as energy signatures contained in crystalline vessels. The air itself shimmered with translation fields that converted thousands of languages into comprehensible speech. Yuna had studied xenobiology her entire adult life, but seeing every known intelligent species gathered in one place made her heart race. "Remember the protocol?" Junho whispered beside her. His hand rested casually near his sidearm, a habit from his military days. "We bow to the High Chancellor, present our credentials, and wait for recognition." Yuna nodded. 50 years ago, humanity had been discovered by a Thraxian scout ship passing through what they called the Outer Territories. 50 years of observation, testing, and careful diplomatic contact had led to this moment. Earth was finally being granted provisional membership in the Galactic Senate. It was humanity's chance to join the greater community of intelligent life. They walked down the central aisle toward the raised platform, where High Chancellor Mix presided. The Chancellor was an ancient being, its body resembling a massive tree with glowing sap running through translucent bark. Its species had been traveling the stars for over 1,000,000 years, or so the briefings had claimed. Yuna tried not to stare as they passed. She noticed something odd. The murmur of conversation that had filled the chamber began to fade. Species that had been engaged in animated discussion fell silent. Some turned to watch the human delegation with what could only be described as intense scrutiny. Others looked away quickly, as if afraid to make eye contact. "Is it just me, or are they acting strange?" Gunho muttered under his breath. "They're probably just curious," Yuna replied, though she felt the same unease. "We're the new species. Everyone wants to see what we look like." They reached the platform and performed the formal bow that protocol demanded. Yuna held up the crystalline data chip containing Earth's credentials and history. High Chancellor Mix extended a branch-like appendage and accepted it. The Chancellor's voice emerged from the translation field as a deep, resonant tone. "We acknowledge the presence of the delegation from Sol 3, the world you call Earth. You have been observed according to our customs. You have demonstrated technological capability, social organization, and peaceful intent. We welcome you to this gathering of civilized worlds." Polite sounds of acknowledgement rippled through the chamber, but Yuna noticed they seemed forced, mechanical. Several senior senators were leaning toward each other, their translation fields deliberately muted to keep their conversations private. One of them, a towering Thraxian with blue-gray skin, was staring at Junho with an expression that looked distinctly like fear. The ceremony continued. Yuna delivered her prepared speech about humanity's hopes for cooperation and mutual understanding. She spoke about Earth's desire to access the galactic archives, to establish trade routes, and to contribute to the greater good of all species. Her words were met with silence that felt heavier than it should. When the formal session concluded, Yuna expected to be surrounded by curious delegates eager to ask questions about Earth. Instead, the chamber emptied with unusual speed. Species that had traveled across the galaxy to attend this session suddenly remembered urgent appointments elsewhere. Within minutes, the Grand Hall stood nearly empty. Counselor Vex, the same Thraxian who had been staring earlier, approached them slowly. His species was one of the oldest in the Senate, respected and influential. Yuna brightened, hoping for a friendly conversation. "Counselor Vex, it's an honor to meet you," she began. "I've read extensively about Thraxian culture, and where exactly is your world located?" Vex interrupted. His voice was controlled, but his three-fingered hands were trembling slightly. "Provide precise stellar coordinates." Junho frowned at the rudeness, but Yuna maintained her diplomatic composure. "Of course, we're located in Sector 877 Gamma. Our star is a yellow dwarf, approximately 4.6 billion years old. Third planet from our sun, with one natural satellite. The coordinates are, she rattled off a string of numbers and astronomical markers. As she spoke, Counselor Vex's face underwent a dramatic change. His skin darkened from blue-gray to almost black. His breathing became rapid and shallow. When Una finished, he stood frozen for several seconds. "That sector," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "That sector is marked in the old charts as forbidden territory." "Forbidden?" Gunho stepped forward. "Why would it be forbidden? There's nothing dangerous about our system." Vex looked at them both with an expression that transcended species differences. It was pure, undiluted terror. "I must consult the archives. I must verify something. If I am wrong, I will apologize. If I am right." He turned and walked away quickly, his footsteps echoing in the empty chamber. Una and Junho exchanged confused glances. Behind them, a small figure emerged from behind one of the chamber's data terminals. It was Archivist Nella, a rabbit-like species with large eyes and delicate features. She approached them cautiously, looking around as if afraid of being overheard. "You should leave," Nella said quietly. "You should leave Nexus Prime and return to your world immediately." "What?" Una asked. "Why? What's happening?" Nella's large eyes were filled with something that looked like pity. "Your stellar coordinates? They match records in the sealed archives. Records that are not meant to be accessed. Records that speak of a world that should not exist." "I don't understand," Junho said, his hand moving again toward his sidearm. "What records? What are you talking about?" The archivist glanced around again, then leaned closer. Her voice dropped to barely audible levels. "Your world has another name in the ancient texts. A name that has not been spoken aloud in this chamber for 10,000 years. A name that appears only in warnings." "What name?" Una demanded, but Nella was already backing away, shaking her head. "I have said too much. If they know I spoke to you, I will lose my position. Perhaps my life. Just leave, please, before they decide what to do about you." She disappeared through a side door, leaving the two humans standing alone in the vast empty chamber. Above them, the light from 1,000 distant suns continued to shine through the transparent dome. But somehow, the galaxy felt much darker and more dangerous than it had just an hour before. Jono looked at his fellow officer and friend. "This isn't the welcome we expected." Una stared at the door where the archivist had vanished. Her analytical mind was already working through the implications. Forbidden sectors, sealed archives, ancient names. Terror in the eyes of species that had existed for millions of years, and all of it triggered by Earth's simple stellar coordinates. "No," she agreed softly. "This is something else entirely. And I think we need to find out what they know about our world that we don't." 3 days had passed since the strange welcome ceremony, and things had only gotten worse. Ambassador Una sat in the delegation's quarters reviewing yet another canceled meeting notification on her datapad. Every appointment she had scheduled with Senate members had been postponed indefinitely. Trade negotiations that had seemed promising during preliminary discussions were now stalled without explanation. Even casual invitations to diplomatic receptions had dried up completely. Captain Junho entered the room with Taiyang, Earth's security chief. The muscular former Special Forces officer looked frustrated, his jaw clenched tight. Junho carried a portable scanner that was displaying biological data. "You need to see this," Junho said, placing the scanner on the table. Taiyang noticed something odd when he was doing security sweeps near alien delegations. Una leaned forward. The screen showed various biological readings with color-coded indicators. Most were in green or yellow zones, indicating normal function. But several key markers were spiking into red. "What am I looking at?" she asked. "These are stress responses," Taiyang explained. "Elevated heart rates, hormone surges, dilated blood vessels. Whatever the alien equivalent is for each species, they all show the same pattern. They're afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of us," Junho said flatly. "These readings were taken when we walked past different delegations in the common areas. The moment we come within visual range, their fear responses spike. Some species even show signs of preparing to flee. Dr. Minji entered the room at that moment, carrying her own datapad. The xenobiologist looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes from days of research. "I've been analyzing the biological data we collected during the ceremony." Junho's right. Every species that saw us showed classic fear responses. But here's what doesn't make sense. Humans aren't physically threatening compared to most species here. The Thraxians alone are 3 times our size. Why would they be afraid of us? Yuna stood and walked to the window. Outside, the massive space station rotated slowly, offering views of the Nexus system's blue star. Dozens of ships from various civilizations hung in orbit, their designs ranging from elegant to bizarre. Somewhere on the station were answers to their questions. "We need to access those sealed archives Archivist Nella mentioned," Yuna said. "Whatever information they're hiding about Earth, it's the key to understanding this reaction. Breaking into restricted Senate archives would be a serious violation," Junho pointed out. Though his tone suggested he was already considering how to do it. "So is treating Earth's delegation like contaminated cargo," Yuna replied sharply. "We came here in good faith. We've followed every protocol, and we're being isolated without explanation. I want to know why." Taiyang cracked his knuckles, a sound that made everyone turn. "I did reconnaissance last night. The archive section has security, but it's designed to keep out species that follow the rules. A few of us don't always follow the rules." That evening, Taiyang led Yuna and Yunho through maintenance corridors that most delegates didn't know existed. The security systems on Nexus Prime were advanced, but they were designed to detect alien technology and methods. Human approaches to infiltration were unknown to them, which provided an unexpected advantage. They reached a junction point where Taiyang disabled a sensor cluster with a device that would look like a simple power fluctuation to the monitoring systems. Junho kept watch while Yuna worked on accessing the sealed chamber's entrance. Her diplomatic credentials gave her baseline clearance to the archives. But the sealed sections required authorization she didn't have. "Can you bypass it?" Junho whispered. "Give me a moment," Yuna replied, her fingers moving across the alien interface. The systems were logical once you understood the underlying structure. After several tense minutes, the door slid open with a soft hiss. The sealed archive chamber was smaller than expected, barely the size of a large office. Rows of crystalline data storage units lined the walls, each one glowing with soft internal light. In the center of the room stood a holographic display terminal. Yuna approached it carefully, aware that they might have triggered silent alarms. "Damned." "Earth's stellar coordinates in the database," she told. "Do Ho search for anything related to Sector?" Junho worked the controls while Taiyang guarded the door. The holographic display flickered through countless records, most written in languages that the translation system struggled to interpret. These were old files, dating back thousands of years. Finally, a match appeared. "Found something," Junho said. "But the classification level is... I've never seen a security rating this high." "Open it," Yuna ordered. The holographic display expanded, filling the room with text and images. What they saw made all 3 humans fall silent. The document was titled in an ancient script that the translator rendered as Catalog of Existential Threats to Galactic Civilization. Earth's stellar coordinates were listed. But the name beside them wasn't Earth or Salthri. It was something else entirely. A name in a dead language that the translator struggled with before finally offering an approximation. The Death World, or possibly Harvester's origin. Dr. Mingi had insisted on joining them despite the risk, and she now squeezed into the chamber to read the documents over their shoulders. Her scientific mind immediately began analyzing the information. "This can't be right," she muttered. "This classification system rates planetary environments by danger level. Class 1 is minimal threat. Class 2-5 is considered hazardous. But Earth is classified as Class 12, Yuna finished, her voice hollow. The highest rating in their system. The document contained biological surveys of Earth's ecosystem, but the perspective was completely different from how humans viewed their own world. To the galactic civilizations, Earth wasn't a life-giving paradise. It was a nightmare of competing apex predators and extreme survival pressure. Gravity 1.2 times galactic standard, Junho read aloud. Atmospheric oxygen content dangerously high, enabling rapid combustion and supporting large predatory organisms. Temperature fluctuations extreme. Tectonic instability regular. Native life forms exhibit unprecedented aggression and adaptability. More files opened automatically, linked to the first. They showed images of Earth's animals, lions, sharks, bears, eagles, but the descriptions beside each image read like horror stories. Cooperative pack hunters, with complex tactical behavior, aquatic. Ambush predator with sensory capabilities, surpassing most surveillance technology. Territorial, apex predator capable of killing organisms 3 times its mass. They're describing Earth's nature as if it's a weapons. Development facility, Dr. Minji said, her scientific detachment cracking. Every animal is cataloged as a threat. Taiyang pointed to another section. Look at this. It's about human ancestors. The file contained skeletal remains and genetic data. Not modern humans, but something older. The translator struggled again before settling on a name, harvesters. The document explained that 10,000 years ago, a species from Earth had achieved space travel. They hadn't used technology in the way other civilizations understood it. Instead, they had evolved biological capabilities that allowed them to survive in the vacuum of space for short periods. They could hibernate during long journeys. Their bodies could process radiation that would kill most species, but it was their behavior that had terrified the galaxy. The harvesters didn't seek peaceful contact. They didn't build civilizations in the traditional sense. They hunted. They consumed. They spread from world to world like a plague, treating other intelligent species as prey.
Oh.
This says they conquered 47 star systems before the Galactic Coalition could respond, Junho said quietly. Billions died. Entire species went extinct. The Coalition barely stopped them by creating a dimensional trap that... He stopped reading, his face pale. Yuna leaned in to see what had shocked him into silence. The text described how the Coalition had used ancient technology to create a temporal displacement field. They had lured the harvesters back to their home world and activated the trap. The entire planet had been sent backward in time. By 200,000 years, the displacement had erased the harvesters from existence. Their conquests had never happened. The civilizations they had destroyed were restored to the timeline, but the planet itself remained, moved back to a point before the harvesters had evolved into their final form. They tried to wipe out Earth, Yuna whispered. They sent our entire world back in time to prevent the harvesters from existing. Dr. Minji was frantically scrolling through genetic data. Her hands were shaking as she compared ancient harvester samples to modern human DNA. The match is 73%. We share genetic markers with them. We're their descendants. That's impossible, Taiyang said. We're not monsters. We don't consume other civilizations. No, Dr. Minji agreed. But we evolved from the same rootstock. The temporal displacement set Earth back before the harvesters became what they were. Life continued evolving, but it took a different path. We're what the harvesters might have been if they had developed differently. A soft sound behind them made all for humans spin around. Archivist Nella stood in the doorway, her large eyes reflecting the glow of the holographic displays. She looked terrified, but also resigned, as if she had known they would eventually find this place. The emergency session of the Galactic Senate was called for the following morning. Yuna stood in her quarters staring at her reflection in the mirror. Behind her, Captain Junho was reviewing tactical data on his personal display, while Taiyang checked their security equipment one more time. Dr. Mingy sat at the desk, still analyzing the genetic information they had discovered in the sealed archives. They're going to demand answers, Junho said without looking up from his work. Questions about our intentions, our capabilities. Whether we pose a threat to galactic civilization, we deserve answers too, Yuna replied. Her voice was steady, but anger simmered beneath the surface. They sent our world back in time. They tried to erase our entire evolutionary history because they were afraid of what we might become. A chime at the door interrupted them. Tien moved to answer it, his hand near his weapon. But it was only Ambassador Hannah, the second human diplomat who had arrived on a supply ship 2 days earlier. Behind her stood General Doyen, his military uniform bearing the insignia of Earth's Space Command. "The fleet has arrived," Doyen announced without preamble. 12 ships holding position at the edge of the system. "They're officially here to protect the delegation, but everyone knows they're really here in case this situation turns hostile." Yuna nodded. When she had sent her encrypted report back to Earth through quantum communication, she had known the government would respond with force. Humanity had worked too hard for recognition to accept being cast aside because of ancient history. "The Senate wants all of us present," Hannah added. "Not just the diplomatic staff. They specifically requested that military personnel attend as well. I think they want to see what kind of threat we actually represent." An hour later, the entire human delegation stood in the Senate chamber. This time, every seat was filled. Every species that held membership had sent representatives. The gallery sections were packed with observers. This wasn't a routine session. This was a judgment. High Chancellor Mix called the assembly to order. The ancient being's voice resonated through the translation fields with unusual weight. "We convene this emergency session to address a matter of existential importance. The species recently admitted under the designation Sol 3 has accessed classified historical records. They now know the truth about their world's place in galactic history. We must determine how to proceed." Counselor Vex stood from his delegation's section. The Thraxian's voice was thick with barely controlled emotion. "The truth is simple, High Chancellor. These beings come from Valdris, the Death World. They are descendants of the Harvesters, species that nearly destroyed all galactic civilization. Their admission to this Senate was a mistake that must be corrected immediately." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Yuna felt Junho tense beside her, but she placed a restraining hand on his arm. They had agreed she would speak first. "May I address the Senate?" Yuna asked formally. Mix gestured assent with a branch-like appendage. Yuna stepped forward to the central platform, knowing that every eye in the chamber was watching her. Every species was measuring her words, her movements, looking for signs of the monsters their ancestors had fought. "Honorable members of the Galactic Senate," she began. "We have indeed learned of our world's history. We know about the Harvesters. We know about the temporal displacement that your coalition used to alter our evolutionary timeline. And we know that you look at us and see the ghosts of a species that terrified the galaxy 10,000 years ago." She paused, letting her words settle. "But we are not the Harvesters. We share genetic ancestry with them, yes? But so do chimpanzees and bonobos share ancestry with us. So do wolves share ancestry with the dogs we have domesticated. Evolution is not destiny. You cannot deny your nature." Vex shouted. "Your world is a death trap of competing predators. Your species evolved in conditions that would kill most civilized beings. You are apex predators, wearing the mask of civilization?" "You're right," Yuna said simply. The admission caused shocked silence in the chamber. "We are apex predators. We evolved on a world that demanded strength, adaptability, and intelligence for survival. Our ancestors hunted in packs. They learned to use tools and fire. They competed with other predators for resources. All of this is true." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of various delegates. "But the question is not what we were. The question is what we chose to become. Yes, we evolved as hunters, but we also evolved empathy. We domesticated animals instead of exterminating them. We formed complex societies based on cooperation. We created art and music and philosophy. We chose to be more than our instincts demanded." Elder Pravis, one of the founding members of the Senate, spoke for the first time. His species resembled crystalline formations that pulsed with inner light. His voice emerged as pure tones that the translators converted to speech. "Your words are eloquent, Ambassador, but words are easy. How can we trust that you will not follow the path of the Harvesters? How can we be certain that your predatory nature will not eventually dominate your better impulses?" Before Yuna could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Taiyang immediately moved to a defensive position while Gunho accessed his tactical display. General Doyen's expression darkened as he received an encrypted communication. "Hostile action," Doyen announced. A radical faction has launched an attack on Earth. 3 ships bypassed our defensive perimeter using Galactic Senate technology. They're attempting to destroy our homeworld. Chaos erupted in the chamber. Some species shouted accusations at the human delegation. Others demanded order. High Chancellor Mix tried to restore calm, but the situation was spiraling out of control. Una felt cold fury building inside her. While they had been here trying to prove their peaceful intentions, someone had decided to solve the problem by committing genocide. She turned to face the Senate, and something in her expression made even Counselor Vex take a step backward. "You want to see what we are?" she asked, her voice cutting through the noise. "You want to know if we're monsters? Watch and learn." General Doyon was already coordinating with the fleet. "All ships, intercept course to Earth. Priority 1 is protection of civilian population. Rules of engagement? Disable attacking vessels, but minimize casualties." "Minimize casualties?" Vex exclaimed. "They're attacking your world. Why would you show mercy to those who would destroy you?" Junho answered before Yuna could. "Because that's what separates us from the harvesters. We don't kill unless we have no other choice. Those ships contain living beings who made a terrible decision, but they're still living beings. We'll stop them without becoming murderers ourselves if possible." The Senate chamber's main display screen activated, showing real-time feeds from Earth's orbital defense network. The human fleet was moving to intercept the attacking ships. The 3 vessels were smaller than warships, probably civilian transports that had been modified with weapons. They were approaching Earth from different angles, trying to overwhelm the defenses. But Earth's fleet didn't engage with overwhelming force. Instead, they used precision targeting to disable the ship's propulsion systems. Tractor beams caught the vessels before they could crash into the atmosphere. Within minutes, all 3 attackers were secured, their crews alive and unharmed. "Targets neutralized," came the report through Doyen's communication device. All crew members survived. "Taking them into custody for Senate authorities?" The display screen showed the captured ships being carefully brought to a secure holding position. Not destroyed. Not obliterated in revenge. Simply stopped and secured with minimal force necessary. The Senate chamber fell silent. Archivist Nella, who had been watching from the gallery, spoke into the quiet. Her voice was soft but carried throughout the space. The harvesters would have pursued those ships back to their homeworld and killed everyone there. They would have made an example that would terrify others into submission. But these humans stopped the threat and protected their attackers' lives. That is not the action of monsters. Elder Pravis pulsed with bright light, which the translators indicated was a sign of deep consideration. The records showed that the harvesters were incapable of mercy. They could not comprehend restraint. Yet we have just witnessed humans exercise both, even when their world was under attack. Perhaps the genetic similarity is less important than we believed. Counselor Vex was not ready to concede. One act of restraint does not prove they are safe. They still possess the capabilities of the harvesters. They are still apex predators from a death world. "You're absolutely right," Una said. She had returned to the central platform, and her voice was calm now, determined. "We are dangerous. We evolved in conditions that made us strong, adaptable, and capable of violence when necessary. But we also evolved something the harvesters never had, the ability to choose a different path. We can be dangerous and choose not to be. That's what makes us different." She looked directly at High Chancellor Mix. "The galaxy needs protectors who understand violence but choose peace. Species who can stand against threats precisely because they know how to fight but prefer not to. We didn't ask to be descendants of the harvesters. But perhaps that heritage can serve a purpose. Let us be the guardians who carry the burden of strength so others don't have to." The delegation quarters were quiet that night, but none of the humans could sleep. Professor Jisoo had arrived from Earth on an emergency transport, carrying data files and research that might help their case. The evolutionary biologist spread holographic displays across every available surface, cross-referencing genetic sequences and behavioral patterns. "The genetic analysis is complete," Jisoo announced to the assembled group. "I've compared samples from ancient harvester remains with modern human DNA. The similarity is undeniable. but so are the differences. Ambassador Yuna studied the floating genetic maps. Even without advanced training, she could see where the sequences diverged and where they matched. Can you explain it in terms the Senate will understand? Jisoo nodded, adjusting the display. Imagine two rivers, flowing from the same source. For a long time, they follow the same path. That's the 73% genetic similarity. But then something causes them to split. One river continues down a steep, violent path. That's the harvesters. The other river finds a gentler route, developing different characteristics along the way. That's humanity. What caused the split? Captain Junho asked. The temporal displacement, Dr. Mingi interjected. She had been working alongside Jisoo, comparing notes. When the coalition sent Earth back in time, they reset the evolutionary clock. The environment was similar, but small differences in climate, available prey, and random genetic mutations caused our ancestors to develop differently. Specifically, they developed stronger social bonds. Heijin, the cultural ambassador who had remained quiet during most of the crisis, finally spoke. The poet had been requested specifically by Earth's government to represent humanity's artistic and philosophical achievements, so we're the same species that took a different path. Like siblings who grew up in different families and became different people. That's a good way to put it, Jisoo agreed. The harvesters were solitary hunters who formed temporary packs for specific hunts. They had no art, no music, no culture, beyond basic survival strategies. But humans developed permanent social structures. We created families, tribes, and eventually civilizations that required developing empathy, communication, and moral reasoning. Leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Will the Senate believe that difference is enough? They're still terrified of us. General Doyen entered the room at that moment, having just finished coordinating with the fleet. The 3 ships we captured are being held in Senate custody. Their crews are from a species called the Kelter. They're a younger civilization, only 3,000 years into space travel. When they learned Earth's true identity, they panicked and decided to eliminate the threat before it could grow. Have they been harmed? Yuna asked immediately. No. They're receiving medical care and decent treatment, though they seem confused about why we didn't kill them. Doyen's expression was grim. The Senate has requested that we allow them to conduct psychological evaluations of our personnel. They want to test whether our restraint yesterday was genuine or just an act for their benefit. I'll volunteer, Captain Junho said immediately. All will, Yuna added. If psychological testing will help prove our case, then we submit to it willingly. The next morning, the human delegation reported to a specialized medical facility within Nexus Prime. The testing room was designed to accommodate multiple species. With adjustable environments and sophisticated monitoring equipment, a team of xenopsychologists from various civilizations waited to conduct the evaluations. Captain Junho went first. He sat in a chair while sensors were attached to his head and body, monitoring his neural activity, hormone levels, and emotional responses. The lead psychologist, a being whose species resembled a floating jellyfish, explained the process through a translation field. We will present you with scenarios and measure your responses. We need to understand how humans react to threats, competition, and moral dilemmas. Please answer honestly. The sensors will detect deception. The scenarios began. They showed Junho images of Earth's predators hunting prey. His brain activity showed recognition and understanding of hunting behaviors, but no desire to participate. They presented situations where violence would benefit him, and he consistently chose non-violent alternatives. They tested his capacity for empathy by showing suffering in other species, and his responses indicated genuine emotional reaction. Interesting, the psychologist noted. Your brain shows the neural structures associated with apex predator behavior. The instincts are present, but layered over them are additional structures that regulate and control those instincts. It's like having a weapon with a safety lock. That's what civilization is, Junho replied. We all have the capacity for violence. We choose not to use it, except when necessary. The testing continued throughout the day. Every member of the human delegation submitted to evaluation, Dr. Minji's results showed strong analytical thinking combined with emotional intelligence. Tai Yang, despite his military background, demonstrated remarkable impulse control and moral reasoning. Even General Doyan, whose career had been built on understanding warfare, showed clear patterns of prioritizing diplomatic solutions over military ones. When Hajin's turn came, the results puzzled the examiners. The poet's brain activity patterns were completely unlike what they expected from a species descended from apex predators. His responses to scenarios involving art, music, and cultural expression lit up areas of his brain that had no analog in harvester physiology. Professor Jisoo, who had been observing the tests, stepped forward. That's the 27% genetic difference we've been trying to explain. Humans didn't just evolve differently in degree. We evolved differently in kind. We developed capabilities that the harvesters never had because our environmental pressures were different. Can you elaborate? The examiner asked. Jisoo pulled up his research on the medical facilities display. The harvesters evolved during a period of extreme competition and scarce resources. Survival meant being the strongest, fastest, most aggressive. There was no evolutionary advantage to cooperation beyond temporary pack hunting. But when Earth was sent back in time, those environmental conditions were slightly different. Resources were more abundant. Climate was more stable. Our ancestors found that cooperation and social bonding provided survival advantages that pure aggression didn't. He showed genetic maps highlighting specific changes. These mutations control oxytocin production, the hormone associated with bonding and empathy. These regulate serotonin, affecting mood and social behavior. These influence mirror neurons, which allow us to understand and relate to others' emotions. None of these advantages existed in the harvesters. Dr. Minji added her own findings. We also domesticated other species: dogs, cats, horses, and hundreds of others. The harvesters never domesticated anything. They only hunted. But humans learned to form bonds with other species, to care for them and work with them. That required developing empathy that could extend beyond our own kind. The examiners consulted among themselves in their various languages. Finally, the lead psychologist addressed the human delegation. The testing confirms that while you retain the physical and neurological structures of apex predators, you have developed additional capabilities that fundamentally alter how those structures function. You are not the harvesters wearing a disguise. You are something genuinely different. But as the delegation was leaving the facility, an incident occurred that would prove more important than any psychological test. A young alien child, no more than 5 years old and human equivalent, had wandered away from its parent. The child belonged to a small, rabbit-like species and had gotten separated in the crowded station corridors. It was crying, lost, and frightened. Captain Minho, one of the fleet commanders who had come down to the station, heard the crying and investigated. He found the child huddled in a corner, terrified. When it saw Minho, a large human male in military uniform, the child's fear intensified. Security footage captured what happened next. Minho immediately dropped to his knees to make himself smaller and less threatening. He spoke softly, though the child couldn't understand his language. He pulled a piece of candy from his pocket, something he carried to help with the stress of command, and offered it. The child was hesitant, but slowly approached. Within minutes, Minho had the child calmed down and was carrying it gently while searching for its parent. The reunion was emotional. The child's parent was grateful, but also shocked that a human, one of the feared descendants of the harvesters, had shown such care to their offspring. The incident was minor, barely worth noting in official records, but the footage spread throughout the station. Shared from species to species, archivist Nella watched the footage in her quarters and wept. The harvesters had eaten the children of other species. They had shown no mercy, no compassion, no recognition of innocence. But this human soldier, trained for war, had knelt down to comfort a frightened child from an alien species he had never encountered before. She saved the footage and attached a note that she sent to every member of the Senate. This is not the behavior of the harvesters. This is the behavior of a species that has chosen to be something better. The Galactic Senate chamber had never been more crowded. Every delegation was present, and the gallery sections overflowed with observers from hundreds of species. The vote that would take place today would determine not just Earth's membership, but potentially the future relationship between humanity and the rest of galactic civilization. Ambassador Yuna stood with her delegation in the central area, where all could see them. She wore her formal diplomatic uniform, and beside her stood Captain Junho, General Doyan, Dr. Ming-Age, Professor Jisoo, and the other key members of Earth's team. Behind them, projected on massive displays, were the results of the psychological evaluations and genetic analyses that had been conducted. High Chancellor called the assembly to order. The ancient being's branches moved slowly, deliberately, as if the weight of the decision ahead pressed down even on such a long-lived species. We gather to determine the future of the species that has identified themselves as human, from the world they call Earth, which our ancient records know as Valdris. The chamber fell silent. Every translation field was active. Every recording device captured the moment. This was history being made. Before we vote, Mix continued, Ambassador Yuna has requested the opportunity to address this body one final time. The Council has agreed. Ambassador, you may speak. Yuna stepped forward. She had prepared a speech, carefully crafted words designed to appeal to logic and reason. But standing there, feeling the weight of so many eyes upon her, she decided to speak from her heart instead. Members of the Galactic Senate, honored delegates, I stand before you as a representative of a species that did not ask to inherit the legacy of the harvesters. We did not choose to be descended from monsters. We did not choose to be born on a world that terrifies you. We did not choose to carry genetic markers that remind you of your darkest historical nightmares. She paused, letting her words echo through the chamber. But we do choose what we do with that inheritance. Every day, every moment, we make choices. We choose cooperation over competition. We choose empathy over exploitation. We choose to protect the weak instead of consuming them. We choose to build instead of destroy. Those choices define us far more than our genetic heritage ever could. Counselor Vex stood to interrupt. Beautiful words, Ambassador. But words are not sufficient. How can we trust that your species will maintain these choices in the future? How do we know that your predatory nature will not eventually overwhelm your moral principles? You can't know, Yuna answered honestly. No species can guarantee its future behavior with absolute certainty. Can you guarantee that no member of your species will ever commit violence? Can any civilization here promise that they will never face moral challenges or make mistakes? We cannot promise perfection. We can only promise to keep choosing to be better than our worst impulses. She gestured to the displays showing the test results. The psychological evaluations prove that we have the capacity for moral reasoning. The genetic analyses show that we evolved capabilities for empathy and cooperation that the harvesters never possessed. The incident with the lost child demonstrated that even our military personnel, trained for combat, instinctively protect the innocent. We have shown you everything we are. Now we ask that you judge us based on what we do, not what your history says we might become. Ambassador Hannah stepped forward to join Yuna. But we also understand your fear. We understand that asking you to trust us is asking a great deal. So we propose something unprecedented. We call it the Covenant of the Inheritors. The displays changed, showing a formal document that the human delegation had drafted overnight. Professor Jisoo explained its contents. The Covenant proposes that humanity accept a unique role within the Galactic Senate. We will serve as dedicated peacekeepers and first responders to existential threats. When dangerous situations arise that require force, we will be the ones who bear that burden, Captain Junho answered. Because we understand violence in ways that many species do not. We evolved as predators, as hunters, as beings capable of combat. But we also evolved the wisdom to know when violence is necessary and when it is not. We can be the guardians who stand between civilization and threats, precisely because we know how to fight, but choose peace whenever possible. General Doyan added his voice. The Covenant includes strict oversight. Every military action we take would be reviewed by Senate observers. Our forces would operate under Senate authority, not independent command. We would be the sword that the galaxy wields, but we would not be the hand that decides when to swing it. Dr. Minji pulled up biological data. Moreover, we propose sharing our research into human psychology and evolution. If we understand why we develop differently from the harvesters, perhaps that knowledge can help other species. Perhaps understanding how apex predators can develop empathy and moral reasoning has value beyond just our own case. Archivist Nella, who had been watching from the gallery, suddenly stood. Her voice was soft but clear. "If I may speak, High Chancellor." Mix gestured permission, and Neela descended to the main floor. The small rabbit-like being seemed fragile among the larger species, but her words carried weight. "I have studied the ancient records more thoroughly than almost anyone living. I have read accounts of the harvester attacks, seen the damage they caused, felt the terror they inspired, and I can tell you with certainty that these humans are not the harvesters." She pulled up the security footage of Captain Minho, comforting the lost child. A harvester would have killed that child without thought. It would have been prey, nothing more. But this human soldier, trained for war, knelt down to offer comfort. That single action tells me more about humanity's nature than all the genetic tests and psychological evaluations combined. They are capable of violence, but choose compassion. That choice is what defines them. Elder Pravis's crystalline form pulsed with bright light as the ancient being rose to speak. "I witnessed the harvester attacks. I voted to create the temporal displacement that changed Earth's timeline. I have carried guilt for that decision for 10,000 years, wondering if we had the right to alter an entire world's evolution. Now, I see that perhaps we did not doom a species. Perhaps we gave them a chance to become something the harvesters could never be." The elder's voice grew stronger. "The galaxy needs what these humans offer. We need species strong enough to face threats, but wise enough to choose peace. We need guardians who understand darkness but walk in light. We need protectors who know the cost of violence and therefore use it sparingly. I vote to accept both humanity's membership and their covenant." Counselor Vex was not convinced. "And if they betray us? If the predator nature overwhelms their control, we would have armed our own executioners, and we face them as we faced the harvesters before." Elder Pravis replied calmly, "But I believe we will not need to. I believe they are offering us something precious. The opportunity to trust. The chance to prove that evolution is not destiny. The possibility that even species born from violence can choose to become forces for peace." High Chancellor Mix's branches swayed in the silence that followed. "The arguments have been heard. The evidence has been presented. Now we must vote. The question before this Senate is twofold. First, do we accept humanity's continued membership in the Galactic Senate? Second, do we accept their proposed covenant of the inheritors, granting them the role of peacekeepers under Senate authority?" The voting began. Each delegation registered their decision through their console. The process was silent, private, each species making their choice without knowing how others voted. The tension in the chamber grew thick enough to feel physical. Yuna felt Junho's hand briefly squeeze her shoulder in support. The vote tallied slowly, each delegation's choice recorded and compiled. It seemed to take forever. Finally, High Chancellor Mix received the results and reviewed them carefully before speaking. "The vote is complete. By a margin of 53% in favor to 47% opposed, this Senate accepts humanity's continued membership in the galactic community." Relief flooded through the human delegation, but Mix was not finished. "The vote on the covenant of the inheritors is closer. By a margin of 51% in favor to 49% opposed, this Senate accepts humanity's proposal to serve as dedicated peacekeepers under Senate oversight." The chamber erupted in mixed reactions. Some species celebrated the decision. Others registered clear disapproval. But the vote was final. Humanity had earned their place among the stars, though the margin of acceptance was razor-thin. Yuna stepped forward one last time. "Honorable Chancellor, members of the Senate, we accept these results with humility and gratitude. We understand that many of you still harbor doubts. We understand that trust must be earned through actions, not just words. We pledge to prove worthy of the faith that 53% of you have placed in us. And we pledge to work to earn the trust of the 47% who voted against us. General Doyon formally transferred command of Earth's military forces to Senate oversight, a symbolic gesture that would be formalized in the coming weeks. Captain Jun-ho was nominated and immediately approved as the first human sentinel of the Galactic Peace Corps, a new organization that would be created to implement the Covenant.